From now on, you'll eat standing. Stools are for guests." Joanna said it lightly, as if we were sharing some harmless joke, but she didn't laugh. She didn't need to. The meaning was clear enough, like a blade tucked in silk. I stood there, one slippered foot already reaching for the stool, then paused. My body obeyed, but something deeper cracked, small and silent. I stepped back and nodded. Not a word, just nodded like it didn't matter. The kitchen was unusually quiet that morning. No clinking spoons, no humming radio. Just the low hum of the fridge and the click of Joanna's nails against her phone screen. Daniel, my son, was somewhere upstairs, pretending not to hear. He did that a lot lately. Pretended. Pretended not to see me struggling with the stairs. Pretended not to notice that his wife kept making rules about where I could sit, what I could touch, what I could say. I didn't blame him, not entirely. Men like Daniel never grew spines unless the world forced them to. I stood by the counter, sipping my tea without a place to set it down. The stools, 4 of them, high-backed and polished, sat neatly under the island. Like soldiers. Like a reminder. I had once bought those stools myself when I still lived in the old house. Before the stroke. Before I was better off living with family. Before my independence was measured in steps from the bedroom to the bathroom. Joanna moved around me, graceful in her pressed shirt and sharp ponytail. She always looked so clean, like life never quite touched her. "Don't forget your appointment at 10, she said, still not looking up. "I've arranged the transport." Her voice was flat, efficient. I nodded again. I had grown used to nodding. After she left for work, I lingered in the kitchen. The sun had moved higher, cutting sharp lines through the blinds. Dust swirled in the light. Tiny, weightless things. I put my teacup in the sink and looked at the stools again. One by one, I pulled them out, stacked them, quietly, carefully, like handling something that might explode. I carried them, 2 at a time, to the garage, past Daniel's bike and the boxes of holiday decorations that hadn't been opened in years. The sedan was parked in the driveway. My license had expired after the stroke, but the car was still mine, registered in my name. One thing no one had taken yet. I opened the trunk, folded the seats down, loaded every stool inside. I moved slowly, but I didn't stop. Not once. I had always been stubborn, even as a girl. That part had survived the stroke just fine. At 8:45, I called a cab, gave them the address of the donation center downtown, the one next to the church. "I'll need help unloading," I told the dispatcher. "They're stools, for guests." She didn't laugh, either. Just said the driver would be there in 15. By the time we pulled up to the center, the sky was clearing. The early fog had lifted, and the air smelled of warm asphalt and fading summer. The young man at the dock helped me carry the stools inside. He didn't ask why. People who work at those places, they know better than to ask. "Nice set," he said. "Strong wood." "Yes," I replied, "but not made for me." When I got back home, Daniel was still out. Joanna wouldn't return until after 6. I stood in the garage for a moment, looking at the empty space where the stools had been. Clean, uncluttered. In the afternoon, I made myself a sandwich and ate it at the kitchen island, standing. No one around to stop me, no one to grant or deny permission. It wasn't rebellion, not yet. It was something smaller, but just as important. A decision. The first of many. The next morning, Joanna handed me a plastic pill organizer as if I were a child. "Blue is morning, white is night. Don't mix them up." She slid it across the table and smiled in that thin, stretched way that never reached her eyes. Her nails clicked against the plastic lid like a teacher marking a failing grade. I wanted to tell her I had been sorting pills long before she was even born, but I just nodded again. Nodding had become my armor, silent and invisible. She mistook it for obedience. Daniel came in half-dressed, tie loose around his neck. "Mom, Joanna's right," he said, without looking at me, as though my presence embarrassed him. "It's easier if you stick to her system. Less risk." Less risk. As if I were a walking hazard. I looked at his face. My boy, once so warm, now careful not to meet my eyes. He kissed Joanna's cheek on his way out, but didn't touch me, not even a squeeze on the shoulder. My son had learned the art of omission, and he practiced it daily. Joanna's rules multiplied like weeds. I could not go outside alone. You might fall. I could not touch the washing machine. You'll break the cycles. I could not use the oven. Too dangerous. My independence shrank to the size of the spare bedroom, where a narrow bed and a single chest of drawers defined my territory. When I tried to sit in the living room one afternoon, Joanna's voice sliced the air. "That chair's for guests. You'll be more comfortable in your room." Comfortable. That was her word for hidden. At first, I obeyed. I told myself I was recovering, that rest was necessary. But at night, lying awake with the faint tick of the old clock on the wall, I thought of my own house. The porch swing Derek had fixed just months before he passed. The bookshelves I had built with my own hands when I was still strong enough to carry planks. Everything there had been mine. Every cup, every chair, every rule. Here, I lived by someone else's instructions, like a tenant who had overstayed her welcome. The walls began to press in on me. Even the air felt borrowed. One Saturday, Joanna announced, "We're going shopping. You'll stay home. Jason will drop by to check on you." She said it with that same clipped kindness, her version of generosity. Jason, my grandson, the only person whose eyes still lit up when he saw me. He came in late afternoon, tall, lanky, smelling faintly of engine oil. "Grandma," he grinned, hugging me tight. "You're getting stronger. Look at you standing without the cane." "I manage," I said softly. My voice cracked, and I quickly busied myself with the kettle. Jason leaned against the counter. "Why don't you come to one of my games next week? I'll drive you. You'd like it." A spark stirred in me, one I hadn't felt in months. The idea of leaving this house without permission, sitting in the bleachers among people, cheering for my grandson. It felt like fresh air after being underwater too long. "Ask your parents," I said cautiously. He frowned. "Why should I ask them? You're my grandmother. You don't need permission to see me play." I smiled, though it was thin. He didn't know yet how things worked in this house, but his words stayed with me long after he left. That night, I stood by the window, watching the street lamps flicker on. Joanna and Daniel pulled into the driveway, laughing about something I wasn't meant to share. Their laughter floated through the glass, muffled but sharp. For the first time, I whispered aloud into the dark, "This isn't living." The words hung in the air, startling in their truth. I pressed my palm to the glass, steadying myself. Something had to change. Not tomorrow, not next year. Soon. Very soon. I hadn't looked in the mirror properly for months. Not really. Not the kind of look where you meet your own eyes and ask, "Who are you now?" Most mornings, I only glanced to make sure my hair wasn't sticking up too wildly, or that my blouse buttoned correctly. But one Tuesday, When the house was quiet and Joanna had gone to her office, I stopped. The woman staring back was older. Yes, hair thinner, skin marked with lines that no cream could soften. But there was something else I hadn't noticed before. An emptiness around the mouth, as though my face had forgotten how to shape a real smile. I used to smile often. At the library, where I worked for 35 years, I smiled at children discovering books for the first time. At the food pantry where I volunteered, I smiled as I handed out groceries to tired mothers. Even at home, when Derek was alive, laughter came easy. He had a way of turning ordinary evenings into small celebrations. I pressed a hand to the mirror as if the glass might warm under my touch. "You're still here?" I told myself silently. "You're not gone yet." That day, I decided to push myself. The doctor had told me to walk each day, but Joanna always insisted I wait until she or Daniel could supervise. I ignored that. I tied on my sneakers, the same pair I used before the stroke, and shuffled down the hallway. My legs trembled, but I forced them forward, one after the other, like learning all over again. The first time I made it only to the mailbox and back, gripping the banister until my knuckles whitened. The second time, I reached the corner. By the third, I was circling the block. My chest burned, sweat trickled down my back, but each step felt like reclaiming something I'd thought was lost. When I came back inside, breathless but proud, Daniel glanced up from the couch. "Mom, you shouldn't be outside alone. What if you fell?" "I didn't," I answered simply and walked past him. For once, I didn't add a nod. That evening, alone in my room, I opened an old wooden box I had brought from my house. Inside were small tokens of a life before. A silver locket Derek gave me on our 10th anniversary. Ticket stubs from a jazz concert Jason once dragged me to. A photograph of myself at 50, standing in front of the library doors in a bright red coat. I stared at that woman in the photo. She looked strong, capable, whole. I whispered to her, "I want you back." The next morning, Joanna noticed me moving more freely. She frowned. "You should be careful. Don't overdo it. We don't want another episode." But her voice carried something new. A tightness. Control slipping, even just a little. In the quiet hours after they left for work, I began my own routine. I cooked eggs instead of waiting for someone to place a bowl of oatmeal in front of me. I watered the plants in the living room, even though Joanna had told me to let them be. I sat in the sun by the window with my tea, letting the warmth soak into my bones. And each night, I stretched my legs before bed, whispering to myself like a prayer. Stronger. Every day, stronger. One afternoon, Jason dropped by unexpectedly, sweaty from practice. "Grandma, you look good," he said, surprised. "Like you've been training." I laughed, a real laugh, rusty but alive. "Maybe I am." He grinned and ruffled my hair as if I were the younger one. For a moment, in his easy presence, I felt like myself again. When he left, I sat in the kitchen, watching the light fade into evening. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about rules or restrictions. I was thinking about what might come next. And deep down, quietly but firmly, I knew this. I wasn't done yet. It happened on a Sunday, when the church bells had just faded and the neighborhood was still. Joanna suggested we go for a drive. "Fresh air will be good for you." I almost believed it was kindness. Almost. She chose my clothes herself. A faded cardigan with a missing button, a pair of slacks I hadn't worn since the hospital. I reached for a blue blouse instead, one I liked, but she plucked it from my hand. "That one's too fussy," she said lightly. "This is fine. We don't need to dress you up." The words stung. Dress you up, as if I were a doll pulled from a closet, or worse, something to be hidden. I bit my tongue, swallowing the protest. When we arrived at the grocery store, Joanna spotted a neighbor, a woman from her book club, all polished nails and glossy hair. "Oh, this is Margaret," Joanna said, gesturing toward me. "Daniel's mother. She stays with us now." The neighbor's smile faltered for half a second, and in that space, Joanna leaned closer to her and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "She's recovering. Still a bit fragile." Fragile. I stood there clutching the cart, heat rising to my face. I wanted to tell the neighbor I had managed a library budget larger than most small businesses, that I once organized food drives feeding half the county, that I was not a broken ornament, tucked away for safekeeping. But my throat locked, and no words came. The neighbor nodded politely and turned back to Joanna, ignoring me as if I were invisible. They talked about the club's next meeting while I stood there, a silent shadow. Back in the car, I pressed my forehead to the cool glass of the window. My eyes burned, but I refused to let the tears fall until we were home. When at last I shut myself in my room, the sobs came, sharp and raw. I pressed my fist to my mouth so no one would hear. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Derek's picture sat on the nightstand, his steady smile frozen in time. "What would you do?" I whispered into the dark. He'd always been the one to push back, to remind me of my own worth. He'd hated injustice in any form, but Derek wasn't here. It was just me. The next morning, Joanna breezed into the kitchen, humming as if nothing had happened. She placed a bowl of oatmeal in front of me without asking, like I was a child again. I pushed it aside. "I'll make my own," I said quietly. She froze, spoon in hand. "What?" I said I'll make my own breakfast. My voice was calm, steady. Not loud, but firm. For a moment, she looked as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. Then she shrugged, covering it with a thin smile. "Suit yourself." I fried 2 eggs in butter, the smell filling the kitchen. It was the smallest act, but I felt my spine straighten as I sat down, in a chair, not standing, and ate every bite. Later, when Jason came by with a bag of apples from the market, I told him about the store. Not everything, just enough. He frowned, his jaw tightening. "Grandma, you're not fragile. You're the strongest person I know." His words were balm on an open wound. That evening, after everyone went to bed, I slipped into the living room. I turned on the lamp and sat in the guest chair, sinking into its cushion like it had been waiting for me. My heart raced, but I stayed there, sipping tea, watching the shadows shift across the walls. For the first time, I wasn't in exile within my own home. I belonged, if only for that one quiet hour, and I swore to myself it wouldn't be the last. Jason arrived unannounced one Friday evening, his backpack slung over one shoulder, sneakers squeaking on the tile. Joanna wasn't home yet, and Daniel was upstairs nursing what he called a long week. The moment I saw my grandson, the air in the house shifted, brighter somehow, like someone had opened a window. "Grandma," he grinned, pulling me into a hug. He smelled of sweat and grass, the smell of football practice. "You're walking better every time I see you." I patted his arm. "I've been practicing, around the block, every morning." He stepped back, eyes wide. By yourself? Yes. I lifted my chin a little, daring him to argue. But instead, he smiled. That's amazing. You should have told me. We could have done it together. We settled in the kitchen, and for once, I sat without waiting for permission. He pulled out a soda from the fridge, popped the tab, and leaned against the counter, as comfortable here as if it were his own home. Dad says you've been having a hard time adjusting, Jason said carefully, watching my face. I laughed, though it sounded brittle. Is that what he says? Jason frowned. I know how Mom can be. Don't let her get to you. The words caught me off guard. I blinked. You notice? Of course I do. She talks down to you, like you can't make choices. It makes me mad. He clenched the soda can, denting it slightly. You don't deserve that. You're the toughest person I know. I looked at him. Really looked. His face was still boyish in some ways, but his eyes had Derek's steady light. He saw me. Not the fragile figure Joanna paraded to neighbors, not the silent shadow Daniel ignored. Just me. Would you like some pie? I asked suddenly, surprising us both. Jason's grin returned. You still make pie? I can try. We worked side by side, peeling apples, mixing sugar and cinnamon. My hands shook at times, but Jason didn't hover or correct. He just helped, steady and patient. When the pie went into the oven, the smell filled the house, warm and sweet, and for a moment I remembered who I had been. When Joanna came home, she wrinkled her nose. What's all this? Pie, Jason said cheerfully. Grandma's recipe. Joanna's eyes flicked to me, tight with irritation, though her lips curved into a smile. How lovely, she said. Though I wish you'd told me. The kitchen will be a mess. It's fine, Jason shot back, sharper than I'd ever heard him with her. I'll clean up. Her smile froze. For once, she didn't have the last word. Later, after Jason left with half the pie wrapped in foil, I sat at the table staring at the empty plate. My hands still smelled of cinnamon. It wasn't just the pie. It was the laughter, the teamwork, the reminder that I wasn't useless. I was still capable of giving, of creating, of being someone other than a burden. When I went to bed that night, I lay awake not with grief, but with a strange flutter of hope. Small, fragile, but real. Maybe Derek was right all along. Strength doesn't disappear. It waits. And mine was beginning to stir. The following week, I broke another rule. It wasn't grand, not loud. Just quiet disobedience. The kind that slips under doors and seeps into the walls. I woke before dawn, the house still hushed. The clock on the nightstand read 5:30. I slipped into the kitchen, cane in hand, and opened the cupboard. Joanna always set aside a bland routine for me. Oatmeal, dry toast, weak tea. She believed in efficiency, not taste. But that morning, I cracked 2 eggs into a pan, dropped a pat of butter, and listened to the sizzle. The smell filled the kitchen, sharp and rich. It reminded me of mornings long ago when Derek would fry bacon and hum tunelessly, when Jason, as a boy, would pat in, rubbing his eyes. Back then, food had been love. Now it was control. I sat down at the kitchen island, not standing, not hiding. I ate slowly, deliberately. And with every bite, I felt my spine straighten. When Daniel wandered in, still yawning, he blinked at the plate in front of me. Mom, did you cook? Yes. I didn't look up. He hesitated, scratching the back of his neck. You should have waited. Joanna doesn't like... I wasn't hungry for oatmeal. My tone was even, polite, but final. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. For once, he had no words. He poured himself coffee and left without another glance. That afternoon, Joanna came home early. She noticed the skillet drying on the rack, the faint smell of butter still in the air. "Did you cook today?" she asked, her smile tight. "Yes," I answered. "You know you're not supposed to use the stove. It's dangerous." I met her eyes. It wasn't. Her lips thinned, but she said nothing more. She turned on her heel and walked away. Later, I wandered into the living room. The guest chair, the one I was told not to touch, stood by the window, bathed in late sun. I sat down. My heart pounded, as though expecting Joanna to swoop in and scold me. But the house was quiet. The cushion gave beneath me, familiar and soft. I closed my eyes and exhaled. For a moment, I wasn't an intruder in this home. I was a woman sitting in a chair, her chair, in her house. The silence broke when Jason arrived after practice. He bounded in, all sweat and youth, then stopped short when he saw me. "Grandma," he grinned, "you look like you own the place." I laughed, surprised by the sound. "Maybe I do." He dropped onto the couch across from me, pulling out a notebook. "Homework. Don't tell Mom." We sat together, me with my tea, him scribbling equations. The room felt alive, not with rules or silence, but with ordinary life. When Joanna returned and saw us, her eyes flickered. Annoyance, maybe even alarm. But Jason just smiled at her, bold as anything, and said, "Grandma was helping me concentrate." I didn't correct him. That night, alone in my room, I realized something had shifted. Not just in me, but in the house itself. Small acts had power. They carved out space, inch by inch, until even the walls remembered I belonged. And I wasn't about to give that space back. The next step wasn't in the kitchen or the living room. It was at a quiet office on the edge of town, tucked between a dentist and a travel agency. A brass plaque by the door read, "Harold L. Benton, Attorney at Law." I had known Harold for more than 40 years. He'd helped Derek and me draft our will when Jason was still in diapers. He'd watched me struggle through probate after Derek's death, offering tissues and clear instructions in equal measure. Reliable, discreet, and above all, loyal. I called ahead. "Harold, it's Margaret Ellison. I need to see you. Today, if possible." His voice warmed instantly. "Of course, Margaret. 10 o'clock. And don't you worry. We'll make the time." When I hung up, my hands shook, but not from weakness. From resolve. Joanna had arranged a companion driver for me, a woman named Teresa who shuttled me to doctor's appointments. I asked her to take me into town. She didn't need to know why. At Harold's office, he rose when I entered, his hair now silver but his posture still straight. "Well, Margaret," he said, grasping my hand, "you look more determined than I've seen you in years." "I have to be," I answered simply. We sat at his desk, papers neatly stacked, the smell of old wood and coffee in the air. I told him everything. Not in detail, not with tears, but enough. Joanna's rules, Daniel's silence, the slow erosion of my dignity. He listened without interrupting, then leaned back. "You want protection." "Yes. And preparation. I won't be caught unready." We began with the basics. Harold pulled out my existing will, yellowed at the edges. "This leaves most assets to Daniel," he said gently. "Do you still want that?" I shook my head. "No. Daniel has made his choices. Jason is the only one who still sees me. I want provisions for him. And for myself, I want control. While I'm alive, I want everything under my hand. Not Joanna's, not Daniel's." "Then we'll revoke any powers of attorney," Harold said, scribbling notes. We'll set up a living trust in your name, with Jason as contingent beneficiary. That way, no one else can touch your accounts. And Margaret, he paused, lowering his voice. Do you have concerns they might pressure you? I met his gaze. They already do, but not for much longer. For the next hour, we went through documents, each word heavy with meaning. Revocations, declarations, new signatures. My hand trembled at times, but I pressed the pen firmly, my name bold on the page. When it was done, Harold slid the folder toward me. Keep these copies safe. And Margaret? Yes? You've just taken the first step back to yourself. Don't let anyone undo it. Outside, Teresa waited in the car, oblivious. She thought I'd seen a doctor. In a way, I had. Just not the kind who heals the body. Back at the house, I slipped the folder into the drawer of my nightstand, beneath Derek's old letters. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with triumph. For the first time in months, I had acted, not reacted. That evening, Joanna commented on my calmness. You seem different, she said, narrowing her eyes. I am, I replied, and left it at that. Later, alone, I whispered to Derek's photograph. The papers are signed. They won't use me anymore. And for the first time since he died, I felt as though he nodded back. Jason was the one who noticed first. He came by on a Thursday with grease on his hands and a grin on his face, then paused when he saw the tidy stack of envelopes on my table. Thick, cream paper with raised lettering. I had been sorting them into neat piles. One set for Harold's file, one for my drawer, one already sealed and stamped. Grandma, what are those? He asked, pulling out a chair. Receipts, I said, folding a cover letter. A deed transfer, closing statements, odds and ends. He looked up slowly. Closing? I kept my voice even. I sold the house. For a heartbeat, he simply stared. Then he set his hands on the table, very carefully, like he'd learned in shop class how to handle something fragile. Does Dad know? Not yet, I said. Harold will notify him after the funds clear. Jason's eyes flicked to the envelopes again. So, the money, is it for the remodel? What remodel? He ran a thumb along the edge of an envelope. Mom keeps saying once you sell the place, they'll finally redo the kitchen and put in the sunroom. Said it would be for you. More space, more light. She even asked if I could help with demolition on weekends. I thought of Joanna's polished smile, of the stools lined like soldiers, of my breakfasts measured in teaspoons. I folded the last letter and set it with the others. No, Jason. The money is for my life, first. For my rent, for my care on my terms, for my doctor if I choose one, for shoes that don't hurt my feet, and a radio that doesn't talk back. It's in a trust. Harold is trustee if I can't sign. You are beneficiary when I'm gone. He blinked fast, as if the words were too bright. Me? Not Dad? Not Dad. He leaned back, letting out a slow breath. Grandma, Mom said... I know what your mother says, I interrupted gently. I've listened to what she says for a very long time. He looked down at his hands. I thought selling the house would make you sad. It does, I admitted. But keeping it empty while I stand to eat felt sadder. He gave a small, rueful smile. You always put it plainly. I slid one of the envelopes toward him. This copy is for you to hold. It explains the trust and where the funds are. If anyone tries to tell you I'm confused, read it. If anyone pressures you to ask me for money, hand it back and say no. He didn't touch the envelope right away. Will they be angry? Probably, I said, but anger is cheaper than dignity. I can afford their anger better than I can afford to disappear. Jason's throat worked. I'll back you, I know. We spent the next hour going through the mail. He read each letter aloud, careful with the terms he didn't recognize, and I explained in plain words. Settlement statement. The tally of what I got and what I paid. Deed. Proof that a chapter closed. Trust funding. Money moved where hands that aren't mine cannot reach. When we finished, he tucked the copy into his backpack with unusual care. Then he opened the fridge, pulled out the milk, and drank from a glass like a civilized boy, not the carton like his father. Want to drive past the old place? He asked. Just to see. I hesitated, then nodded. Teresa was off that day, but Jason had his car, and I had my cane. We drove slowly, windows cracked, the air dry and faintly sweet. When we turned the corner onto my old street, there it was, a small red sold rider clipped to the white post. The porch swing Derek had hung still creaked in the breeze. The maple out front had dropped a necklace of yellow leaves on the walk. Jason parked under the maple and killed the engine. We sat in the quiet. You okay? He asked. I am, I said, surprised to find it true. Homes are made of people. The people moved on. The rest is wood and paint. A couple walked up the path, mid-30s, fingers laced, talking softly. She held a plant in a clay pot. He cradled a cardboard box. They glanced at us and waved. I waved back. He mouthed, "Beautiful place." She added, "Thank you." We watched them disappear inside. Jason reached over and squeezed my hand. His palm was warm, calloused, entirely real. Where will you go? He asked. I've already found something, I said. Small. A second-floor walk-up near the park. A corner for a chair, that's mine. A kitchen, that's mine. Papers are signed next week. He laughed, a bright, startled sound. You've been busy. Busy feels like breathing, I said, and it did. We drove back the long way, past the library and the deli that still forgets to slice bread straight. At a light, Jason glanced over. Grandma, when you move, do I still get pie? As long as I can hold a whisk. He nodded, satisfied. At the house, he carried the trust packet to my room and slid it into the drawer under Derek's letters. Safe, he said. Safe, I echoed. When he left, the late sun pooled on the kitchen floor. I made tea and sat at the table. My table for now, though not for long. I thought of the rider on the sign, the plant in the woman's hands, Jason's careful reading voice. A chapter closed quietly. Another waited, just as quiet. I sipped my tea, listening to the house settle around me without asking who I was allowed to be. The knock on the back door startled me. Nobody ever used that entrance except the mailman, and he only did so by mistake. I wiped my hands on my apron and opened it. There stood Rebecca, clutching her school bag, her eyes wide and nervous. Grandma, can I come in? She whispered, as though afraid someone would hear her. Of course, dear. I stepped aside. What's wrong? She dropped her bag by the chair and sank down at the kitchen table. Mom and Dad are furious. They said you've gone mad, that you're destroying the family. But I don't believe them. I wanted to hear from you. I poured her a glass of milk, the way she used to like when she was small, and set it in front of her. I haven't gone mad, sweetheart. I've just decided to stop paying for their lives. Her head jerked up. You mean the house, the cars, Toby's tuition? All of it, I answered steadily. From this day forward, they live on their income, not mine. Rebecca's fingers curled around the glass, but she didn't drink. Her lips trembled. They keep saying you'll regret it, that you'll end up alone. I sat down across from her. Rebecca, I've been alone for years already. Being ignored at my own family's table is lonelier than sitting in an empty kitchen." She bit her lip and blinked back tears. "Grandma, you're the only one who listens to me. Mom is always working. Dad is always tired. Toby doesn't care about anyone but himself. If you weren't here—" She stopped, swallowing the rest of her words. I reached across and took her hand. "I'll always be here for you, but that doesn't mean I must let myself be treated like a wallet with legs." Her eyes hardened suddenly, a flash of the same fire I'd once seen in James when he argued at town council meetings. "They're wrong, Grandma. You deserve respect." I smiled faintly. "It's not about deserving anymore. It's about taking it back." We sat in silence, the old clock ticking above the sink. Outside, a car pulled up, tires crunching against gravel. Rebecca stiffened. "That's them," she whispered. A moment later, the front door banged open. Voices carried down the hallway, Garrett's sharp, Marissa's clipped. Toby's heavier steps followed behind. I rose, keeping my hand gently over Rebecca's. "Stay here." "Let me handle it." Garrett stormed into the kitchen first, his face flushed. "Mom, what the hell are you thinking? Do you realize the bank called me this morning? Our mortgage is overdue. Toby's card is frozen." Marissa came in right after him, arms crossed, eyes flashing. "This is childish, Edith. After everything we've done for you—" I cut her off with a raised palm. "Everything you've done for me? Marissa, please list one thing." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Garrett jumped in, desperate. "We've always included you in our family." I laughed bitterly. "Included me? By telling me I wasn't welcome at dinner? By making me stand at the counter like a servant while stools were reserved for guests? Garrett, you included my money. You never included me." Toby slouched into the doorway, chewing gum. "Grandma, you're overreacting. It's just money." "Just money?" I turned toward him, my voice sharper than I intended. "Then pay for your own gas, your own college, your own fancy trainers. If it's just money, why do you all panic when it stops flowing?" The room went quiet. Garrett shifted uncomfortably. Marissa's lips tightened. Toby muttered something under his breath. Finally, Garrett spoke, softer this time. "Mom, we need you. Please don't do this." I met his eyes. "You don't need me. You need what I give. There's a difference." Rebecca stood suddenly, her voice trembling but clear. "Dad? Mom, you can't talk to Grandma like this. She's right. You treat her like she's only useful if she's paying. That's not love." Marissa whipped around, stunned. "Rebecca!" But the girl didn't back down. "I'm tired of pretending. Grandma is the only one who cares how I feel. Maybe if you listened to her instead of using her, you'd understand too." The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting. Garrett looked as though someone had struck him. Toby stared at the floor. Marissa's face reddened with fury she couldn't release. I reached for Rebecca's hand again. "Go upstairs, dear. This conversation isn't yours to carry." When she'd gone, I turned back to the others. My voice was calm, steady, and final. "This house is mine. This peace is mine. And from now on, you will not step into it unless you come with respect. Do you understand?" They exchanged glances. 3 people who'd never expected to hear no from me. Marissa broke first. "This isn't over." I nodded. "For you, maybe. For me, it is." She stormed out, Toby trailing behind. Garrett lingered one last moment. His expression twisted between anger and something like shame. But he said nothing. He left, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I sank into my chair, my hands trembling slightly, but my chest was lighter than it had been in years. For the first time, I had defended myself. And I hadn't done it for money. I'd done it for dignity. The days after that confrontation were strangely quiet. Too quiet. The kind that makes you wonder what storm is brewing behind the stillness. Garrett didn't call. Marissa didn't come tapping her nails against my doorframe with false smiles. Toby didn't shuffle in asking for cash. They had withdrawn, but not surrendered. I used the silence wisely. Each morning, I walked a little farther, my cane less of a crutch and more of a companion. Each afternoon, I cooked meals of my own choosing, tasting butter and spice like they were victories. Evenings I spent in the living room chair that had once been for guests, knitting small things for Rebecca, who visited me after school with homework and secrets. But the storm came, as I knew it would. On the fourth morning, there was a knock at the door. Not the hurried tap of family, not Jason's cheerful thump, but a measured professional rap. I opened it to find a man in a suit, leather briefcase in hand. His smile was polite, but cold. "Mrs. Ellison? I'm Mr. Carver. I represent your son and daughter-in-law. May I come in?" I studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "You may stand." "I don't offer chairs to uninvited guests." He blinked, but entered. We moved to the kitchen where sunlight spilled across the floor. He placed his briefcase on the counter, snapped it open, and drew out a neat stack of papers. "Your family is concerned about your welfare. They believe your recent financial decisions may have been made under stress or without full understanding. They're prepared to petition the court for guardianship if necessary." I laughed, low and sharp. Guardianship. For a woman who walked 3 blocks this morning and fried her own eggs for breakfast? For a woman who just last week signed her trust documents with an attorney she's known longer than her son has been alive? His expression didn't change. "They only wish to ensure you're protected." "Protected from what?" I asked, leaning forward. "From sitting in my own chair? From choosing what I eat? From being more than a wallet with a pulse?" The words hung heavy between us. Mr. Carver cleared his throat. "If you reconsider, we can resolve this privately. They've suggested a monthly allowance for you, with the remainder managed responsibly on your behalf." I stared at him, then at the sunlight inching across the floor. Slowly, I pulled Derek's photograph from the shelf above the sink and set it beside me. His smile in that picture was steady, knowing. "Do you see this man?" I asked quietly. Carver glanced at it, uneasy. "Yes." He trusted me with 37 years of partnership, with a house, with a son, with our savings. He never once questioned my judgment. If I was capable then, I am capable now. Tell my son this: if he pursues guardianship, I will meet him in court, and I will bring witnesses. Witnesses? My doctor, my attorney, my grandson, my granddaughter, and any neighbor who has seen me walk these streets at dawn. I will not hide. I will not be managed." Mr. Carver hesitated, then slowly closed his briefcase. "I'll inform them of your position." When the door shut behind him, I exhaled, steadying myself against the counter. My legs shook, but it wasn't from weakness. It was the tremor of release, like a bowstring loosed at last. That evening, Rebecca sat with me on the porch, swinging her legs. "Mom's been furious," she admitted. "But I told her I'd move in with you if she didn't stop yelling about it." I smiled faintly. "You don't need to fight my battles, child." "I want to," she whispered. The porch light flickered on as the sky darkened. I reached for her hand. "Then stay beside me. That's all I ask. The rest, I'll handle." and for the first time, I believed it. I began to move in secret, not because I feared discovery, but because I wanted peace. I had wasted enough years explaining myself to people who never listened. Action was quieter, but stronger. The apartment was a second-floor walk-up near the park, just as I told Jason. A narrow place, but sunlight spilled in through the wide windows, and the landlord was a kind woman named Mrs. Green, who reminded me of an older version of myself. Practical, watchful, no nonsense. "You want it month to month?" she asked when I signed the lease. "Yes," I told her. "I want freedom." She smiled knowingly. "Then you've come to the right place." Jason helped me move what little I truly needed. He came on a Saturday with his car and that boyish grin, lifting boxes as if they weighed nothing. We carried them up the stairs, one by one, a suitcase of clothes, a small chest with Derek's letters, the folder Harold had prepared, a box of kitchen things I'd salvaged from storage. "Is this all?" Jason asked, surprised. "It's enough," I said. "I don't want to drag old shadows into new rooms." He nodded, respecting the choice, and assembled my chair by the window. When we placed it down, the room felt instantly mine. I spent that night in the apartment alone. The bed was small, the walls bare, but the silence was mine. No footsteps above me, no clipped voices telling me what I could or couldn't do. Just the sound of my own breathing and the hum of the city beyond the window. The next morning, I brewed coffee strong and bitter, fried bacon in the skillet, and ate at my own table, no longer standing, no longer waiting for permission. Each bite felt like reclaiming a country I'd been exiled from. But I wasn't finished. There were still ties to sever. I called Harold and instructed him to cancel the automatic transfers that had been feeding Garrett's accounts for years. Insurance premiums, mortgage supplements, Toby's tuition, all stopped. I asked him to send certified letters confirming the change. My voice didn't tremble once. 2 days later, Garrett arrived at the old house looking for me, but I was gone. Rebecca told me later he stormed through the rooms, shouting, demanding answers from her. She refused to give them. "She's not hiding," she told him. "She's just free." When Jason dropped by my apartment after practice, he looked around, wide-eyed. "Grandma, this place suits you." I smiled, pouring him a glass of lemonade. "It suits the part of me they tried to bury." He settled into the chair opposite mine, textbooks spilling from his backpack. "Mom and Dad will hate this." "They already do," I said softly. "But their hate is lighter than their control. I can carry it." That night, when Jason left, I sat by the window watching the street lamps flicker on. I thought of the long years I had bent my back to keep peace, mistaking silence for survival. Now, in the quiet of my own apartment, I realized survival isn't silence. It's voice. It's choosing. And I had chosen. When I finally turned off the lamp, I whispered into the dark, "This life is mine again." And the room, warm with the smell of coffee and bacon, seemed to whisper back, "Yes." It didn't take long for Garrett and Marissa to realize the flow of money had stopped. The calls began first. Long, insistent rings on my phone. I let them go unanswered. Then came the texts, short and sharp. "Mom, we need to talk. This isn't right. Call me back now." I deleted each one. By the end of the week, Harold called to tell me the transfers had been formally canceled, the accounts secured under the trust. "They can make noise, Margaret," he said, his voice calm and solid. "But they can't touch a cent without your hand." "Let them make noise," I replied. "Noise is easier to ignore than silence." Still, they tried. On Tuesday evening, there was a knock at the apartment door. Not the light tap of Jason or Rebecca, but a pounding, heavy and insistent. I opened it to find Marissa standing there, her smile stretched so tight it could have snapped. "Well," she said, sweeping her eyes over the small living room. "So this is where you've run off to." "I didn't run," I answered evenly. "I walked, on my own legs." She sniffed, stepping just inside, though I hadn't invited her. "Garrett is worried sick. Toby's tuition is past due." "Do you know what that does to his future?" I set my teacup down. "It teaches him reality. A future built on someone else's wallet isn't a future. It's a leash." Her face flushed. "You're being cruel. After everything we've done for you." I raised my hand. "Please stop repeating that line. You've never done for me what you claim. You've done for yourselves. I see it clearly now, and I will not unsee it." She faltered, her voice lowering. "We're family, Margaret. Families share." "Yes," I said. "They share love, respect, care. You offered none of those, only demands." She opened her mouth again, then shut it with a snap. For a long moment she looked at me, as if realizing the woman before her was no longer the one she could shame into silence. Finally, she hissed, "You'll regret this," and turned on her heel, slamming the door behind her. I sat back down, my tea still warm, my heart steady. Not triumphant, just sure. The next morning I went to the bank myself, cane tapping on the tiled floor, and withdrew a small sum in cash. Not for fear, but for independence. I wanted money in my purse, bills I could fold and count, proof that I could provide for myself without asking or apologizing. As I left the bank, the air smelled of rain. I stood for a moment beneath the awning, watching people hurry by with umbrellas and bags, lives of their own rushing past, and I thought, I am among them again. Not hidden, not diminished, among. That evening, Jason visited, dropping his backpack by the door and stretching out on the rug. "Mom's furious," he said matter-of-factly. "Dad's sulking, Toby's whining. But me? I think you look happier than I've ever seen you." I smiled, handing him a plate of cookies I'd baked that morning. "Happiness isn't loud, Jason. It's quiet. It's being able to sit in your own chair without asking." He grinned. "Then I hope you never stand for anyone again." I laughed softly. "Neither do I." When he left, the apartment was still. I folded my blanket, set the dishes in the sink, and stood for a long moment by the window. Outside, the streetlights glowed through the drizzle, each one a small halo against the dark. And I thought, the noise may come, but I am anchored now. Their storm cannot move me. The real break came with Rebecca. She arrived one evening without warning, dragging a suitcase up the narrow stairs of my building. Her hair was loose, her eyes swollen from crying. I opened the door before she could knock twice. "Grandma," she whispered, out of breath. "I can't stay there anymore." I stepped aside and pulled her into my arms. She trembled against me, thin shoulders shaking like brittle branches in wind. I guided her inside, closed the door, and set the suitcase against the wall. "What happened, child?" I asked gently. She sank onto the sofa, wiping her face with her sleeve. "They won't stop fighting. Dad blames Mom for the money. Mom blames you. Toby yells about tuition, and I—" Her voice cracked. "I'm always in the way. They don't see me, Grandma. Not unless they want me to pick sides. I can't breathe there." I sat beside her, stroking her hair as I had when she was little. "You don't need to explain. You're safe here." She clutched my hand, gripping it tight. "Do you mean it?" Can I really stay? I looked around the apartment. Small, yes, but warm. One bedroom, one living room, a kitchen hardly big enough for two. But it was ours now, hers and mine, if she chose. You can stay as long as you need, I said. This is a home, not a cage. The relief in her face was like sunrise. We spent that night together, her curled up on the sofa beneath Derek's old quilt, me in my chair by the window. I listened to her breathing settle into sleep, steady and calm, and I thought of all the nights she must have lain awake in that other house, listening to anger echo through the walls. No child should grow familiar with such sound. In the morning, I cooked bacon and eggs, filling the kitchen with the smell of something solid, something grounding. Rebecca patted in, hair messy, eyes still puffy, but brighter. "It smells like home," she said softly. "It is home," I answered. We ate together at the table, no stools missing, no standing, no whispers of who was allowed where. Just two people with plates and coffee and milk. Ordinary. Beautiful. But peace never stays hidden. By afternoon, my phone buzzed with Garrett's name. I didn't answer. Then Marissa called. Then Toby. Finally, a text from Garrett. "Where is Rebecca?" I showed her the phone. "Do you want me to reply?" Rebecca shook her head firmly. "Not yet. They'll only shout. I need time." So we let the silence stretch. We walked together in the park, my cane steady, her steps quick beside me. She told me about books she wanted to read, about the way her teachers overlooked her because Toby was always louder, about how she felt invisible in her own family. "You're not invisible to me," I told her. She smiled, but there were tears in her eyes. That evening, Jason arrived, nearly tripping over the suitcase in the hall. "Whoa, Rebecca, are you moving in?" Rebecca looked at him, nervous. "If Grandma lets me." Jason's grin softened. "Then it's the best decision you've made." He turned to me, lowering his voice. "They're furious at home. You should be ready." "I am," I said simply. Later, after Rebecca had gone to bed, Jason lingered by the door. "Grandma, this could get ugly. They'll say you're manipulating her, that you're turning us against them." I touched his arm. "Jason, I don't need to turn anyone. They did that themselves. All I'm offering is a place where she can breathe." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll back you." When he left, I stood for a long time at the window, the city lights flickering below. Rebecca's soft breathing drifted from the sofa. For the first time in many years, I felt not just strength returning, but purpose. It wasn't only about reclaiming my dignity anymore. It was about building something for those who still had years ahead. A home not ruled by whispers of exclusion, but by steady love. I whispered to Derek's picture on the nightstand. "She's safe here." And in the quiet of that little apartment, I knew he would have been proud. The storm came on a Sunday, always Sunday, when the world outside seemed quiet and anger echoed louder within walls. I had just pulled a pie from the oven, apple, Rebecca's favorite, when the pounding started. The kind of pounding that rattles the door frame and makes neighbors peer through curtains. Jason was already there, helping with homework, and he froze mid-sentence. "They found her," he muttered. Rebecca stiffened on the sofa, eyes wide, fork clutched in her hand like a weapon. I wiped mine on a towel and opened the door. Garrett stood there, face flushed, Marissa behind him, her lips pressed so tight they'd lost their color. Toby loitered a step back, arms crossed, scowl fixed like armor. "Mom," Garrett barked, Enough of this nonsense. You've taken Rebecca and turned her against us. She belongs at home." I held the doorframe calmly. "She is home." Marissa pushed forward, voice sharp. "Don't you dare twist this. You're manipulating her, filling her head with lies." Jason stepped forward, fists clenched. "Nobody's manipulating anyone. Rebecca chose to be here." Rebecca's voice trembled but rang clear. "I don't want to go back." The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the tick of the clock inside. Garrett's eyes widened as if the words wounded him more than any insult. "Rebecca!" She shook her head, tears threatening. "You don't see me. None of you do. Grandma listens. You never do." Toby scoffed. "Oh, please. You're acting like a brat. You've got no idea how hard Dad works." Jason snapped. "And what about Grandma? You think she didn't work? She built everything you're standing on." Marissa's hand shot out, pointing at me. "This is your doing. You've poisoned them against us." I raised my hand, quieting them all. "No, I didn't poison anyone. I simply stopped being silent. The truth doesn't need poison. It only needs air." Garrett stepped into the doorway, his voice cracking with frustration. "Mom, this family is breaking apart." I looked him in the eye, steady and calm. It was breaking long before I said a word. I simply refused to carry the pieces alone. Rebecca moved to my side, slipping her hand into mine. Her grip was small, but fierce. Jason stayed close, tall and unwavering. For once I was not alone at the threshold. Marissa's composure shattered. "If she doesn't come with us now, we'll call the police. We'll say you kidnapped her." Jason laughed bitterly. "Good luck with that. She's 16, Mom. Old enough to choose. And if you try, I'll stand in court and testify to everything I've seen." Their faces paled. The weight of his words hung heavy, undeniable. I spoke softly, but with finality. "You may rage, you may threaten, but you cannot undo what has been done. I have reclaimed my life. And if Rebecca finds refuge here, then she has the right to it. No law, no paper, no lie will change that." For a moment, I saw it. The crack in Garrett's anger, the shadow of shame in his eyes. He wanted to argue, but the words failed him. Marissa hissed, "This isn't over." I nodded. "For you, maybe. For me, it is." They turned, retreating down the hall, their voices muffled and sharp. Toby muttered curses under his breath, but didn't look back. When the door shut, the apartment exhaled with me. I set the pie on the table, the smell of cinnamon and apples filling the air like defiance. "Sit," I told them, pulling plates from the cupboard. "We'll eat." Rebecca wiped her eyes and smiled faintly. Jason laughed, shaking his head. "You just faced a war and came out serving pie?" I smiled too, tired but steady. "It's what we do. We endure, and we feed what remains." We ate together, 3 voices where once there had been silence. The pie was sweet, but the victory tasted sweeter. When Rebecca leaned against me, whispering, "Thank you, Grandma," I knew I had already won. The weeks that followed were quieter, not free of tension, no life ever is, but quieter, as though the worst storm had finally rolled over and left behind a sky scraped clean. Rebecca stayed with me, dividing her time between school, homework, and long walks we took in the park. Jason came often, dropping by after practice, eating whatever I set before him with a hunger that only youth can carry. My small apartment, once echoing with solitude, now hummed with laughter, arguments over chess moves, and the clatter of dishes. It wasn't the home I once imagined for my old age, but it was a home nonetheless. One I had built, piece by piece, not out of wealth or expectation, but out of choice. Garrett called once, weeks later. His voice was subdued, the anger blunted. "Mom, are you really not coming back?" "I never left myself," I answered gently. "Only the silence you built around me. That silence is yours now, not mine." He tried to argue, but his words faltered. At last, he sighed. "Rebecca won't speak to us." "She will, in time," I said. "But you'll need to listen. Really listen, not to control, not to demand." "Just to see her." He didn't answer. The line went dead. Rebecca overheard part of the call. "Do you think they'll change?" she asked later. I looked at her, at the fierce set of her jaw softened by hope. "People can change, but they must want it. Until then we live." And we did. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the apartment gold, I sat in my chair by the window while Rebecca did her homework on the rug. Jason lounged nearby, eating the last cookie straight from the jar. For a moment, watching them, I felt Derek's presence as strongly as if he stood in the room. I thought of the long road I had walked, from standing at a counter, stools lined against me like soldiers, to sitting here, free in a chair I chose, surrounded by those who still carried the thread of love. Strength had not returned all at once. It had crept back in small, defiant acts, frying eggs in butter, walking to the corner, signing papers with a trembling hand but steady heart. Piece by piece, I had gathered myself until I was whole again. And the lesson was clear. Dignity is not given. It is kept, quietly, stubbornly, even when others try to strip it away. Rebecca looked up from her notebook. "Grandma?" "Yes, dear?" "Do you ever regret it? Selling the house, leaving Dad and Mom behind?" I thought of the porch swing Derek had hung, of the maple scattering gold leaves, of rooms filled with silence that had felt heavier than stone. Then I thought of this room, small but warm, filled with breath and voice. "No," I said softly. "I don't regret choosing myself." Jason raised his glass of milk like a toast. "To Grandma," he said, half grinning. Rebecca lifted her pen. "To Grandma." I shook my head, smiling. "No, children, to us. To choosing a life that's ours." The three of us clinked glass and pen and cookie jar together, laughing. Later that night, after they had gone to bed, I sat by the window alone. The street below was quiet, the city lights steady. I thought of all the women like me, silent in kitchens, bent beneath rules spoken and unspoken, their worth measured in coins or chores. To them, if my voice could reach across walls and years, I would say this: you are not invisible. You are not a burden. Your dignity is yours to keep, even if you must fight for it with nothing but your own steady breath. I whispered the words aloud, as if they might travel farther that way. Then I leaned back, hands folded, heart unburdened. The night was still, but inside me there was no silence. There was peace.